The Sandy and Toddcast is a Mindgarden Media podcast in association with
Screw You, Todd
Productions.
Broadcasting from two very different yet magical places not found on any map. Get ready to discuss the strange, weird, ghostly, crazy, spooky, and odd things that take place around us each and every day. All while having a little bit of fun. This is the Sandy and Toddcast.
And welcome to the Sandy and Toddcast. She is Sandy.
He is Todd.
And this is episode 3, season 13.
13. Lucky number 13.
You think
Here
it's
we
lucky?
are. I don't know. I've never, everybody makes such a big deal out of like 13 being lucky or unlucky or whatever. I've gone through so many Friday the 13th and they haven't been any better or worse than any of my other days.
Yeah.
So I can't really tell you that anything is horrible about Friday the 13th. I don't know where that came from.
I'm not sure either. I do know that I was born on a Friday the 13th, so I've always kind of considered them. I knew you were going to say that. Knew that.
I was born on a Saturday.
Oh, I knew that too. What day of the week is it? I mean, not what day of the week, but what number?
6th.
6th of Saturday the 6th. Okay.
Of February. Yep. So, but that doesn't excuse you being born on Friday the 13th.
Not at all. So
that's right. You are a year older than me.
That is correct.
A year older in a week.
A week and a year. No, that's not true. Not a week. No, because you're actually not quite a year older than you. Think about that. Because from the 13th, not quite a year. Not
it's
quite
like
a year.
11 months and 3 weeks.
Yes, that's what it is.
Yes. You're still older than me, though. Anyways, moving right along.
So we are at the very end of September.
Yeah.
And here's some things that kind of came to my mind over the last couple of days. As of September, mid-September, I've been living in this house for 8 years, which is absolutely incredible to me. Tuesday of this week is October already.
I know.
And tomorrow will be 2 years since I lost Winston. So it has been just, it's so, I was watching something, over the week, we lost Dame Maggie Smith, who played Professor McGonagall from Harry Potter. And she said, somebody asked her about getting older. How do you feel about getting older? And she said, it's like you're having breakfast every 30 minutes, meaning that's how quickly time flies.
It really does.
It does. I mean, I cannot believe that we're already, rolling into October. Halloween will be here before we know it. And the weather has not started to change yet. It's still very, very mild, very almost summer-like. So
yeah. We had a few cool days last week, but for the most part, it's been pretty seasonal, pretty nice. We went up to, if anybody is following along in order with us, last weekend, Dave and I recorded a bonus episode from Saranac Lake, New York, just talking about Trudeau Sanatorium and Saranac Lake and everything. And we were really hoping, because they're about 3 hours north of us, we were really hoping to catch some really, really vivid color.
Yeah.
And we just didn't. I mean, it was beautiful. Don't get me wrong. Some gorgeous, gorgeous pictures. There is plenty of color, but not that strong, vivid color that I was expecting. It's just been a little bit more mild, even up north of us, than I think we're used to this time of year.
I was talking to a meteorologist here in Wisconsin last week, and I just asked her, I said, is the warmer weather that we've been feeling going to affect the fall colors? And she said 2 things. They probably won't be as vibrant. Yep. And when it finally does turn cooler, they're just not going to last that long. It's going to be a very quick, here we are, bye-bye kind of thing.
And it's funny because I joke, but normally when Dave and I are up north in the Saranac Lake Placid area, it's very cold. It's winter. So we never got the chance to really, at least not yet, to really experience all those beautiful, vibrant colors in the Adirondack Mountains. And then we finally go up and it's a little bit more muted than normal. And I'm like, oh, great. But when we were at the top of Mount Hovenberg, when I was doing the mountain coaster ride down, you get to the top of the ride and you look out and it's just so breathtaking, even with a little bit more muted colors.
Yeah.
It's so breathtaking to see just for miles upon miles. And you can see the 2 Olympic ski jumps, the ramps off in the distance. And it's just such a beautiful sight. And I really... Lake Placid I did not even remember this, but they were also the host for the 1932 Olympics.
Right.
And the 1980 Olympics. But they've really, really embraced it. And it's just such a wonderful place to go. So I highly recommend Lake Placid and Saranac Lake for just that amazing history that you see. So, and you experience. So just a wonderful experience. But yeah, fall, knock on wood, fall is not in full bloom yet. So
not quite.
We're getting a little break.
I did some herbing this morning, which was basically getting them prepared to either dry. Some of them were so overgrown this season that I just burned them in the fire pit today, which was kind of nice too. But yeah, it's that time of year. Brought in my rosemary plant. Hopefully, Esmeralda makes it through the winter. We'll see how she does. And I brought in my bay tree too, the bay leaf tree.
Oh, yes, yes.
We'll see how, I'm going to call him Uncle Fester, and just see how he does for the year.
I name all of the wildlife that comes in our backyard because we have the Blink cameras. So I can see everything that's going on. And there's Fat Terry, the raccoon. And then last night...
Why do you call him Fat Terry? That's kind of demeaning.
He is huge. Like, he may be the biggest raccoon I have ever seen. And then there's Arnold the skunk. It could be Annie because there was a smaller one with him once. We have Fritz the fox, who I haven't seen in a while. We have a couple of stray cats. There's Tom and Moo. Let's see who... Oh, Patty the possum comes through. It's just fascinating. I put a little decorative pond in my backyard at the beginning of the season. I have a frog who lives in there now. So I'm already planning on upgrading my frog pond next year. But I can't do anything now because I want to see if our frog leaves tadpoles, if we end up with tadpoles and stuff. So I'm not going to touch anything until probably June of next year. Let them develop if they're there. And so it's just been wonderful. So today's the day when you and I are done recording. We're going to start putting out the Halloween stuff.
Yep.
That's the time of year for that. But otherwise, just doing stuff around the yard. It's so nice to not be freezing when you're doing all this stuff. And I have you to thank for the wildflowers that I have in my backyard now. Because way back at the beginning of the summer, in the early spring, you said you should do some wildflowers. And so we put wildflower seeds right at the edge of our patio. And they have come up. They're absolutely gorgeous. I think I sent you several pictures of them. And they're just all different kinds of wildflowers, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. And now, instead of going out to bars or going out and doing all of this social gathering stuff, now my backyard just gives me all of that nature and peace and beauty that I could ever want. And that's my preferred habitat now. That's where I hang.
Throw out some flowering herbs next year, and the bees will love that too. I'm going to, because you've actually, with the herbs and stuff, you've actually inspired me in that way too. So that's next for next year too. It was one of those things where I always did herbs. This year I really didn't plant anything. They all kind of came back themselves, except for my rosemary. and they went crazy, and I didn't do anything with them because I was lazy. So they kind of got overgrown and started flowering, which is something that you typically don't want your herbs to do. But the bees loved it, so I just let them go. And in fact, today when I was digging out my rosemary to pot it to bring it in the house, I was hearing this buzzing sound, and I looked, and there was a bumblebee who I think he was going underground maybe for the year. I think that's what they do. I think they hide in the ground, and I think I woke him up, and he wasn't too happy with me, but he settled down, and then I went and did some other stuff and came back, and he was gone. So I think he then burrowed himself down into.
And you know, that's what we want to do. We want to help the bees because the bee population has declined significantly, and they are just as important in the chain of life, the food chain, as any other living being. And so we really want to help. And that's part of why I wanted to do the wildflowers too, is we're helping to promote the pollination and the bees and all of the different insects that use the flowers and the plants. So I'm just loving it. I did one thing before we move on to actual stuff. I did one thing this year that I had never done before. And this was partially due to a podcast that I edit as part of my regular job called, it's a biophilic type of podcast about taking care of the earth and coming back to nature and that kind of thing. And so a lot of people, we're always taught as we're growing up, you have to keep your lawn, really neat and proper and prim. And that's something that I've had to get myself out of over the years. Now, the front yard I give to Dave. I let him mow that all the time, but I've been very slow with the mowing of our backyard. I've sort of let things overgrow a little bit more. I'm not out there with the weed whacker all the time as much as I enjoy weed whacking because it is fun. I've kind of let my backyard go back to nature a little bit. And I think that's why I'm seeing so much more wildlife. We're seeing more bees in our yard than we ever have. We saw more butterflies and moths in our yard. So it's just an amazing experiment. And it's just so cool. So we need to help save the bees because whether we know it or not, it has a direct influence on us as human beings as well.
Save the bees, baby.
Save the bees. I'm sure there's a group on Facebook about that too.
Oh, there is. All right. Yeah. So what do you got going on?
So I thought that there's a couple of things. Do you remember when I said, now it's like a month ago, that Deej from Diggin' with Deej and I were on the phone for like an hour and a half one night. And she was asking me different questions and we were kind of going over things. Well, there were a couple of questions that she asked me about, and I thought maybe we could talk about them today. Now, the first one is all of those stories, and I know you've heard them, all of the sort of folklore type stories about wailing women at the bridge and ghostly apparitions. There's one in Vermont, and of course, I can't think of it offhand now. I think it's like Crybaby Bridge or something like that. There's supposedly a ghost of a woman. The story is that like her lover never came to get her. I'm really pulling this out of nowhere, but came to get her, that kind of story. And so she jumped off the bridge, which is only probably 10 feet from the, over the road. And so people at night can hear her wailing and they can see her sometimes. And there's so many of those folklore stories. And basically, Deej and I were talking, where do they come from? Like, can any of them be real? And I think that there's probably a little bit of reality on all of those folklore stories, those haunting type of stories. But I don't really know that necessarily they're actual ghosts. So the story behind the woman in Vermont is that young kids many, 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 many years ago were playing by the water off the bridge. And, Vermont is known for all of its covered bridges, but they were playing by the bridge and the parent was afraid that they were going to fall in and drown. And so made up the story about the wailing woman and to stay away from the bridge because you didn't want to get, basically pushed into the water or whatever it was. So that is actually the origin of that story. Is there really a ghost? I'm going with no on this. But it is interesting how folklore sort of spins and spins and spins. It's sort of like a snowball in the wintertime, how if you keep rolling it through, remember when you were a kid and you kept rolling the snowball through the snow, it would get bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the kind of idea behind those. And I just thought it was interesting. It's not just that. There's many stories. You could even count the Beast of Bray Road as one of them.
Sure.
You know?
Yep.
What was it really? Was it a beast? Was it something? Of course, there's obviously always the possibility, but how did it really start? Was it just mistaken identity? What was going on? I love the ones that say, you know, there's one just outside of Syracuse, New York here. I think it's called Seven Curves Road or something like that, where there's supposedly like a woman who walks on the road. Was it a bride? I am so unprepared for these stories today, but it's that kind of thing. They all have a similar story affixed to them, but just kind of interesting how one little event or one little, you know, teenagers getting scared by something can turn into such a big, well-known story.
I also wonder, too, as we've seen this happen on some TV shows, where maybe there was, like you said, an inkling of truth.
Mm-hmm.
But because that story's been passed on and passed on and passed on, does it create some sort of life form of its own?
Right.
Like, is it just a story? Or did the Beast of Bray Road manifest into something because so many people put their thoughts and energy into it?
Well, we've heard stories about ghosts being created over the years. There were actual experiments, scientific experiments, where people would, you know, be told about something as if it were real and like pound it into their heads until they believed it so much so that the power of their beliefs together created activity, created things there where there really wasn't anything because it wasn't real.
Right.
So just an interesting thought. I thought that it was kind of neat. And we all love to be scared. Everybody loves to be scared, especially things like that. I
think if you asked my sisters that, they would say no, that they do not like to be scared.
Oh, it's, you know, when we were teenagers, we would go to some of those places because you want a thrill. You want to know that, you know, the wailing woman, you know, or the bride on the side of the road. And then there's that one story, Todd. And I, again, can't remember all of it, but it may sound familiar to some people. And it's a specific name, but it's where they pick up the hitchhiker.
Mm-hmm.
And the hitchhiker on the side of the road, and they take the hitchhiker and like drop him off somewhere, and then they look back and they're gone completely, or they look over in the seat and there's nobody there, that kind of stuff. I just think it's interesting. Is it somebody like making all of this stuff up, or just to get people going, or are they actually thinking they see this stuff?
So as we're recording this, all of a sudden the door behind you opens up and I see a cat on the other side there. But the door opens up and I'm thinking there's a ghost.
Well, it's funny how this works, because if I don't put something, like it's an old door to my studio,
right,
so it doesn't have that tight clicking.
Right.
So if I don't put something up against it, like I have weights against it, they'll push on it. They know to push on it, and I forgot to put the weight against it. So I don't know if anybody heard, but Spike's been making noises here because he wants to go downstairs and see Dave.
Yeah, we couldn't hear that.
At that point, the timing was impeccable. Gouda pushes his head, takes his head and pushes the door open. Spike goes outside. Now Gouda's in here. So now Gouda's in here looking around, and Spike's downstairs with Dave. That's my life.
You definitely have a little zoo going on there.
I do. So interesting. If anybody has any, I'd love to hear some stories. If anybody has any local stories that they've heard about over the years, share them with us. Message us. You can message me or Todd independently, or message us in our group. Stay Weirdos, friends of the Sandy and Toddcast, or you can message us on our Sandy and Toddcast page on Facebook. Any of it, just send us a message and tell us about some of the stories that you heard growing up, because I think that would be interesting. I'd like to read some. And next week, I'm going to talk about our friend Chris, Chris, we haven't forgotten you. We've just been waylaid by a lot of stuff. But this week, I thought it would be interesting to talk about the whole Conjuring House mess. And it is indeed a mess.
Been following it a little bit, but not much.
It's interesting because, okay, so here's the deal. The Conjuring House in Rhode Island is actually the house that the Conjuring movie, the original Conjuring movie, was based off of. Now, they took a lot of liberties with it because it is a movie, right? And we've talked about The Conjuring before. But Andrea Perron, who was one of the children who lived in this house, has written a few books, and she's been on numerous podcasts and numerous speaking engagements. And I have to say, it's a really scary story to me. Just there's been inconsistencies found with things and everything, but overall, it's just a very unsettling story. And you and I have talked previously in the past about this, that it doesn't look like it's necessarily a positive type of haunting with the things that have happened. Ed and Lorraine Warren were involved in it. It's just it's just a place that there are very few places in this world, Todd, where I would say I'm just not really interested in being a part of any investigations or going to this house. It really is kind of an unsettling place for me. And we've talked about it several years ago, a couple of, I think they were ghosts, paranormal investigators bought the house. They were a couple, husband and wife, and they bought it, and they kind of turned it into a place where you could stay and you could investigate. And I would say that we probably weren't too excited about hearing about that because, I don't know, just the place is very unsettling to me. So then a few years ago, they sell it. And another woman buys it. And she is going to turn it into another money maker. The woman who is the current owner now. And so it's been a very interesting thing to watch. And I remember, Todd, when she bought it, you and I talked about it on the show. It was maybe 2 or 3 years ago now. And we talked about it on the show, and we were just kind of like, here we go. Why are you exploiting this? You know, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Whatever. But now things have taken a really weird turn. So Jason Hawes from Ghost Hunters fame, his daughter Satori and her fiance, I don't know if they're husband and wife yet, but
not sure.
Her fiance, they were actually working there for a while and had made some sort of deal with her to open almost like a haunted object museum, similar to the Warrens type of museum. And they were going to set it up in the barn. And there was a whole other controversy going on with Satori and her fiance about this method that they have for contacting the spirits. And a lot of people, so basically what they do is they hold hands, and between the two of them, they can get clicks and knocks in response to their questions. And a lot of people said, oh, that's just bullshit. They're faking it somehow. You and I talked about it, and we kind of decided that, hey, maybe it's not. Because if you think about it, what is a seance? A seance will usually have more than two people, but it's essentially everybody's holding hands. You're making a circuit of energy.
Right.
So who's to say that two people holding hands and trying something like that, if the chemistry is right, that they may not, that they're essentially just doing a mini seance, if you think of it that way. So I never jumped the bandwagon for it's all fake. It's because I think that it's certainly a possibility.
I've also seen, now whether or not what we've seen is 100% real, what I've seen on the shows that they've done this on, they've had response with the knocking and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember there was a time when something was said about a pen and the floor, like a writing pen, and they did look and there was a frickin' pen there.
Yes.
So, I mean, I can't, again, we ask people to go into this with an open mind. I think you have to go into this specific thing with an open mind as well. Right. Does that mean I believe it 100%? I don't know. I haven't experienced it yet.
But isn't that the thing? Dave and I talk about this too all the time. It's like, I don't have all the answers. How can I say without a shadow of a doubt that they're faking everything that happens? How can I say they're not? I can't. I can only go by my personal experiences and base my thoughts off of that. Are they faking it? I don't know. But I do know that there's also a possibility of it. And that's, I think, the best thing that you can do is hope for people with open minds to understand that you can't say it's not possible. You can't say it is. It's just the experience that you're having. And I just find it odd that Jason Hawes in the paranormal community is so well known. And so, like, there's so many people who respect and trust him. For his daughter to be running some kind of sideshow thing doesn't really make sense to me. Because if you think about it, Satori, his reputation would be on the line as much. So if it's something that they discovered they can do, why are people knocking it? Just let them do their thing. It's not going to change anything one way or the other.
Right. If you investigate another way, investigate your way. Nobody's telling,
Exactly.
Okay.
I know, because one of the things I always talk about is there are some paranormal groups out there who refuse to use mediums or psychics, right? They will only use scientific equipment and personal experiences. They won't bring somebody in. But then there are others who will use both. And I'm a person who believes in using both because I think that, and especially my own experience of being on both sides of it, like I go on the medium side with the abilities, but I also love to use my scientific equipment. I think it just brings about a much more well-rounded investigation when you can use both in tandem with each other. But do I think that the people who don't use mediums are jerks or that they're going to get anything less? Who am I to judge? If they don't want to use that, then don't use it.
Right.
It has nothing to do with me or my beliefs or what I practice in my daily life. And so I just think that whether they're faking it or not, really, does it matter? It's interesting to watch. They know whether they are or not, and that's for them. But I do think it's possible. I do. If you can believe that a seance will work, why can't you believe that a man and a woman holding hands together cannot make something like that happen too?
Right.
It just can't.
Right.
And I'll tell you, I have tried clicking my toes, and it is very difficult to click your toes and do it loudly. So I don't know what people are talking about when they said that one of them is clicking their toes.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
No sense. So anyway, so to get back on the story. So they were working there for this woman, and I can't remember her name, but which is probably for the best because she'll probably sue us too. But apparently someone who used to work there at one point in time, she has cameras everywhere. She just started getting a little strange, and they came back after they had left for the day to get whatever they had left there. And it was dark. And so she convinced herself that it was actually Jason Hawes, coming back to try to murder her do something to her.
Yep.
And it's just kind of snowballed from there. And the guy who actually came back, who was on the camera, has publicly stated that was me. And this is why. And she does not believe it. And since then, she has just nonstop harassed him, harassed his family, messages him, has done all kinds of crazy stuff, accusing him of trying to murder her over and over and over again, several times, of just crazy stuff. And the reason I wanted to talk about this, not only because Deej had brought it up, it's been going on for a long time, not just because Deej had brought it up, but also because I just saw one of Jason's videos like last week or whatever, and she's still going. Yeah. And then she was actually twice sent to a mental facility to be evaluated because of this stuff that she's doing. And she's saying that, and what was the name of the people who originally owned it? I can't remember.
The Perrin family?
Nope, the original owners.
Gotcha.
Was it John? Let's see. One of the spirits that's supposed to have been there all these years apparently has been telling her this stuff. She says that the spirit of John Arnold, that's the name, he owned the home with his wife Abigail in the 1800s, is the one who is telling her that Jason Hawes is doing all of this stuff to her, is plotting against her. Cody is Satori's fiance. And it's very strange because there was a fire in the barn that destroyed all of their museum stuff, everything. Like the house was built in 1736. And in 2013, of course, The Conjuring came out. It was very loosely based on the story, but, so Cody and Satori had filled the barn with their own furniture, equipment, paranormal artifacts throughout the renovation process to turn it into this museum. And so it's all just kind of gone crazy from there. And she's saying that John Arnold, one of the original owners of the home, is the spirit that's telling her all of this stuff, and that she needs to, this owner, she blamed Satori and Cody for the fire, saying that they hired someone to do it. And it's just really snowballed from there. So it just brings me back to the conversations that you and I have been having over the last few episodes of how does someone who was seemingly quite quote unquote normal when first, here it is. She said, John Arnold told me you've been stealing money out of the cash box for the past 2 months. To Cody and Satori. So she's now communicating with John Arnold, who was alive in the 1800s, according to her. And it just makes you wonder, how does someone who seemingly has all of her marbles, basically, how does she deteriorate over the last couple of years to the situation that everybody is in now?
Well, again, you just wonder if whatever's in that house has anything to do with any of this, or maybe it has to do with all of it. I mean, we just don't know.
No.
And again, if somebody that had any sort of mental issues before, or were vulnerable, buys a house like this.
Yep.
And I don't know a lot about what Satori and her fiance were bringing into this thing, but here again, You're messing with stuff.
Yep.
Who knows what you're bringing into that location?
God only knows.
I don't know. Why do people have to mess with this stuff? It makes me dislike the paranormal world of investigating more and more every time these stories come up. I don't believe Jason Hawes is the kind of guy who's going to try and make somebody feel crazy so that he can get their haunted house. Like, I just don't think that's who he is.
That's the newest thing. That's the newest thing now, is that he's trying to get her committed
so he can have the house.
He can have the house. And
Right.
he's like, I don't want this house.
Right.
I don't want anything to do with this house. There is no way. Now, my personal, and we've talked about this before the previous owners even put it up for sale. My thought process is stop disrespecting the house. Stop trying to make money off of it.
Yep.
Stop doing all this shit that is just egging on negativity and treat it with respect.
Or just bulldoze the fucking thing down and get rid of
Do
it.
something with it. Turn it into a museum. Turn it into a place with respect for it. Don't do overnight ghost hunting. Don't do ghost hunting. You can do a tour of the home. Do things that are respectful to it. Why are you trying to turn everything into money? And look what's going on right now. This is insanity. And she's already been committed twice for mental evaluations. I'm sorry. I do think, maybe this is going to sound crazy to people, but I do think there's something going on with that house.
I do too.
I do.
And I think the house and the energy there probably has something to do with what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
But number one, I don't want to discount what that woman is going through. She's going through some things.
Of course not. Right. Exactly.
But every time somebody wants to buy a haunted hotel and turn it into some sort of sideshow, shit goes down. I mean, even Jason and Grant bought an inn in New England, right?
Yep. And was it Mount Washington, I think?
Now, not Mount Washington. That's a pretty big one, but it was a smaller thing.
Yeah, I remember it. Yes.
And they had some bad shit going down there with their families and stuff like that, because they were trying to turn it into this location where you could go and ghost hunt and all that. And they had some relationship problems. They had problems with their employees saying they were doing things and all this sorts of stuff, right? And and you can say, well, maybe they're not great people and they do bad things in their life. Maybe this influenced them to do stupid shit too. I don't know, but don't do that. Like,
I know. Stop doing that. Stop making money your motivator. Because that's what it is 99.9% of the time. Money is the motivator. I don't understand how respect can't go a long way in the spiritual world as well, because I deal with that every time I deal with the spiritual world. It's all about respect. You know, spirits are not stupid. They know what you're doing. And I don't know. It's just a strange situation. I've never seen anything like this before, but it does. It kind of wraps back around to, were you in any way emotionally, physically, spiritually, intellectually vulnerable in some way to this? Because with the history of this building, how this is just beyond bizarre. And now this has affected not only the woman herself, but it has affected Jason Hawes. It has affected his family. It has affected the people who work there. It has affected the town. It has affected the paranormal world because of something that happened. Is it possible that she's just Looney Tunes? Yes. But is there something else going on here that's moving her in the direction that this is going?
Could be.
When I read that she said that John Arnold told her That was really strange.
Yeah.
I mean, these people lived in the 1800s. So I don't know. I don't know, Todd. It's just a really strange situation. I just don't know how to feel about it. I guess that at some point we're going to see the next chapter in this. But I don't know. It's very strange. I know.
Nobody listens to us.
No, and we know it all.
I know,
No.
exactly. We know everything. We told
seriously, we could have called this.
We called it. We told
several years
people.
ago.
Yes, we did. On this podcast, we said, do not buy that house and do something like this with it. You bought the house, you did something with it, and now everything's fucked up.
Yes. I wouldn't even step foot in that house.
My
and
God.
You know me. You know me. I will check places out. I will do things, but I would not. There are very few places in the world that I would definitely not go to, and that is one of them. I do not want that shit attaching to me in any way, shape, or form, or affecting me, you know? And I thought there was one area of Trudeau Sanatorium that was a little darker, but nope. Or Plainfield, I was just watching something about Ed Gein again the other day. And I was thinking about our session at the cemetery.
Yeah.
And how strange that was and everything. You know, would I go back there? I don't know if I'd actually go back to the cemetery, but it was just interesting. But
If I were you, I wouldn't go back.
not after what I experienced.
Not after dancing on a grave.
Nope.
I would I would go back, but here's the difference. Like, I'm not looking to buy a property because it's haunted. And then, you know.
I think you're asking for trouble. I don't care who it is. If I own the land, the property that Ed Gein, the farmhouse was on,
that you trespassed on and were illegally walking on, yes, is that what you're talking about?
God.
The illegal.
I went like 20 feet past the gate. I wanted to see where the house was. I wanted to see where the house was. You two babies were sitting in the car.
I'm just saying, I'm not going to break a law to see where the house was in broad daylight.
I wanted to see. There was nobody around. We were in Plainfield, Wisconsin. The whole population's like 900 people. But I will say this: if I had the opportunity to own that land, for $1, I would turn it down. End of story. You know, you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
I'm not messing with that stuff. Just not going to do it. You know. So
it's like, you know, here's the thing: like, you wouldn't buy contaminated land to put your farm on.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you buy spiritually contaminated land, knowing that it's, you know, I mean, just people are dumb.
Just the idea of bad juju. You know, it's like, this is where this horrific thing took place, or this is where this violent haunting took place. Here, let me buy it, and then I'll allow people to come and hang out here and provoke the spirits who reside here and stir up all the energy because, you know, I can make a buck. Come on.
Yeah, you can make a buck or two, but you'll end up in the insane asylum, or, you know, with death and destruction or pain and disease.
Exactly. I don't get it sometimes. I don't get it. You know, there's a right way and a wrong way to do just about anything.
Yeah.
And I've learned through personal experience the right way and wrong way for any kind of paranormal investigation so far. And, you know, I see things like this coming and I'm like, and you're right. We did call it. We did say that. Don't do that.
Listen to the smartest podcast anywhere. The Sandy and Toddcast.
We know it all.
Yes.
We know it all.
What are we going to do next week? Any idea?
I think we can talk about what Chris messaged me. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. And who knows, I may have a couple of other things coming our way.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
It'll be fun, as usual, because we're fun. And maybe there'll be a new Jason Hawes video we can talk about. Maybe. I kind of want to keep up with this now because I'm starting to get into it even more to kind of see what's going to happen.
Maybe by the next one, we will have watched the new Salem's Lot and we can talk about that.
How exciting is that going to be?
We'll see. I don't even know if I have HBO Max, but we'll see.
I got to see if I do too, but we'll see.
She's like, Dave.
If not, I'll sign up for a free trial
There you go.
for 30 days.
All right. Let's do this. Let's say goodbye for now. We'll see you on the next podcast. Again, like us and share us and stay weirdos, friends of the Taz, all that kind of shit. But stay weirdos, friends of the Sandy and Toddcast. I didn't know what else to say. All right. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.